Now, the UKIP leader, Nigel Farage, is facing questions about how he uses some of his EU expenses. It's claimed he receives an allowance of £15,500 a year to run his MEP constituency office in Bognor Regis, yet the premises are provided rent-free by local UKIP supporters. Well, let's speak now to Mr Farage. He joins us from the European Parliament in Strasbourg. And a very good afternoon to you, Mr Farage. I mean, we'll talk through some of the detail of that specific claim, but what it all goes to illustrate, as you've pointed out in the past, is that you MEPs are wallowing in a jacuzzi of expenses cash.
No, they're not expenses. We don't actually claim for anything. I have not claimed for an office. I have not claimed this figure of £15,000. The Times, who are the pro-establishment newspaper, have deliberately tried to conflate the expenses row in Westminster, where people have been using taxpayers' money to buy houses and make large capital gains, with the way the system in the EU works. Now, by the way, I'm not defending this system. I want it to end. But I get given, as does every other British MEP, £3,580 every month to spend in the United Kingdom and in my constituency as I see fit. There are a list of allowable expenses. We can spend it on newspapers, we can spend it on books, we can spend it on subscriptions, on periodicals, on hotel bills, on restaurant meals, on taxis, on travelling, or, if we want to, on an office as well. We do not have to provide any receipts or any explanation for how that money is spent, and so what the Times have written is wholly erroneous.
So you're giving it... Well, let's go through some of the detail, because they've got that claim, haven't they, that it costs about £3,000 a year to run the office. It is, of course, as we said earlier, rent-free. Where does the other £12,000 then go? OK. Now, you know, allowing for the fact that this is a non-story anyway, because how I spend that money is up to me, and I spend to just interject
prosecute.
Here. It is ultimately taxpayers' cash, Mr Farage. We pay, as,
as
your party
cash.
points out, we pay a lot of money to the European Union as taxpayers.
Yes, it is taxpayers' cash, which I spend to promote the campaign of getting Britain out of the European Union. Now, I'm pleased to tell you that the lead story, wrong as it was with the expenses word being used, but when it used the figures, it is wrong. They quoted a former office manager on the front page of the Times today, David Samuel Camps. He is enraged by what the Times have written. He has written me a letter saying he said no such thing, that the figure for running the office was much higher than the Times have put on their front page. And if you go to the UKIP website, you will see his letter there.
All right, well, tell the Times' story is falling
to pieces.
Just tell the taxpayer where the money goes. It's a very, very small office, isn't it? 620 square feet, rent-free. Where does the rest of the money go? What are the expenses?
Do you know, the electricity bill is more than £3,000 a year. We have burglar alarms, we have insurance, we have a massive post bag and a mail bill that is growing by the week as the level of interest and support for our party and our campaign and our cause grows. The point is, Dermot, these are allowances and not expenses, and I'm the man that wants to bring it to zero. I don't want British MEPs. I don't want... You know, I have not, in the 15 years I've been here, bought a house, bought vintage wine, sought to make any personal financial gain from this whatsoever. OK, but, I mean, it sounds like it must be a sauna in there. Do you know what the average, and they're very expensive, dual fuel bill is per household in the UK? You say you spend £3,000 on a 600-square-foot office. Do you know what the average bill is per household? Just over £1,000. Yeah. So how are you spending £3,000 then? Well, they're not running. Well, if you're calling me a liar, then you're joining the Times, whose story's just fallen to pieces, and you're joining Dennis McShane, who was the last person who accused
on electricity.
Me of missing...
What are you doing in there? What do you run in there? Running machines, running banks of computers, running banks of computers, doing things that use a lot more electricity than many household chores. Sounds like Tracy Island, then. You've got banks of computers. You're doing the same thing. You are doing exactly the same thing that the Times is trying to do. You are trying to conflate the expenses regime in Westminster, where people make claims, with the EU system of fixed monthly allowances. Well, listen, we've agreed. I'll tell you what. You know, we all should be concerned. I'll tell you what we're doing. We've agreed it's taxpayers' cash. We know the regime, and it's far from perfect in the House of Commons, which you have criticised MPs' behaviour, most notably Maria Miller in the past. But they have to account for things like this. They have to give us receipts. They have to let us examine them. And if they overclaim, they have to repay them. You say
say you're given the cash and you spend it as you feel free on campaigning for UKIP. Is that right?
That is how the European Union works. It's one of the reasons I don't want us to be a member of it.
How much did you claim? How much did you claim? What, being an MEP for 15 years? How much, not claim?
I don't claim any money.
How much have you received?
I don't know. If you take £3,580 a month, which is about the mean, and multiply it out, you will come to a figure. But the amount of money I'm given to do this job is exactly the same as the other 750 MEPs, and that's the point. And what is happening here is there is a false application here.
But is that the excuse? We heard it from the MPs on expenses, didn't we, when they were in all their troubles, that everyone else was doing it. That's no excuse, Mr Farage. You lead the party. You have to set an example.
Yes, I'm setting the example. I want to be sacked. I want every British MEP to be sacked. I want these allowances to end totally, and I want us to have a referendum to get us out of the European Union. I've spent 15 years. I have travelled more miles. I've spoken at more meetings. I have worked harder across the United Kingdom than any other British MEP, and without those allowances, I couldn't have done the job.
OK, but, I mean, would £3 million be about right? 15 years as an MEP. You said in, what was it, 2009, 10 years as an MEP, that you'd received about £2 million. Can we another million over the next 5 years?
Yeah. That was what Dennis McShane said, and he accused me of wrongdoing, and then he went to prison.
It's what you said to Dennis McShane.
Yeah. Well, it was a mistake, so I'm not going to give you a figure. You know, if you want to get the figures, ask the European Parliament. They'll give it to you. I will repeat, my claims, my allowances as an MEP are exactly the same as every other British MEP.
But, I mean, just on the office money, do you think it's right it's paid into your personal account? At least then we'd be able to account for where it all goes.
No, I don't approve of any of the financial methods of the European Union. After all, they haven't had the accounts signed off for the last 18 years in a row. I'm not sitting here to defend the way the European system works, but to explain that it is utterly and entirely different to the Westminster one, and that I have not sought to make any personal gain from these allowances over the course of the last 15 years. And for the Times to run a story where the witness is a woman who is currently serving a suspended jail sentence, having been convicted of fraud and forgery, to say that I took taxpayers' money and put it in the Cayman Islands, frankly is outrageous. This is a political smear of the worst kind, and what it shows is just how well UKIP is doing in the run-up to the European
Well, I mean,
election.
you mentioned the Cayman Islands there, so you haven't got any accounts there. What about the Isle of Man? You've got a trust there, haven't you?
No, my children did briefly have one. It's been closed. I've never been the beneficial owner of a trust in the Isle of Man. I've never had any account of any kind ever in the Cayman Islands. And it is, you know, you may as well put on the front page that I've committed murder. It is just an outrage to rely on a criminal that I barely know that makes an allegation like this. And it just shows the Times are desperate to have a go at UKIP. But I'm pleased to say their story is, as we speak, falling to pieces.
But the charge is not that, Mr Farage. You must have read the editorial that goes along with it in the Times as well, and it's one that many people must be thinking. It's one of hypocrisy. You criticise what you call the political class looking after its own and letting down the electorate, and yet here you take, well, let's say tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of pounds and of euros. You let it go into your personal account, and you don't really let us know where it all goes. You don't tell us how it's spent.
I've said since 1999, in my first campaign, elect us to the European Parliament and we will use the wherewithal that this institution provides to fight against Britain's continued membership of this union. And that's why I've spent 15 years working damned hard, the length and breadth of this country, trying to push that campaign. And given the rise in Euroscepticism, I'm beginning to think it might have had some effect.
And just, I mean, Mr Farage, on the source of the story, the Times don't identify the source of the story.
They did in their email to me yesterday. They named the woman and said that she had gone on the record saying that I was transferring money to the Cayman Islands. I'm sorry, I told them that it was utterly and entirely untrue, and yet, in an attempt to try and defame my reputation, they still put it on the front page. OK, well, we'll leave that between you and the Times newspaper. Mr Farage, thank you very much indeed. Nigel Farage there, the leader of UKIP, live there from Strasbourg.